Welcome to Fear Spiral. Tonight, I walked into Blackwood Cemetery for answers, but something in the air whispered, "Don't go inside." Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, to run from the suffocating silence that pressed in from all sides. The ancient iron gate, heavy with rust and age, groaned open on its own, a sinister invitation into the darkness beyond. A thick, chilling fog swirled around my feet, clinging to the tombstones like lost souls. This wasn't just any cemetery. It was a place where stories ended, where secrets were buried deep in the cold, unforgiving earth. I'd heard the legends, the whispers of what happened here after sundown, but I had to see for myself. I needed to know the truth behind the disappearances, the strange lights, the chilling whispers carried on the wind. My flashlight beam cut a nervous path through the gloom, revealing weathered angels, weeping stone tears, and names long forgotten by the world. The air grew colder with each step, the feeling of being watched intensifying until it was a physical weight on my shoulders. I wasn't alone. The rustling wasn't just the wind, and the shadows moved even when I stood perfectly still. I pushed deeper into the heart of the cemetery, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The main path dissolved into a maze of leaning headstones and overgrown ivy. That's when I saw a faint, flickering light coming from the old mausoleum at the center of the grounds, the one nobody dared to approach. The Blackwood family crypt. Local lore said it was a gateway, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. Against my better judgment, I moved toward it, drawn by an unseen force. The whispers grew louder, clearer, forming words I couldn't quite understand but felt in my very bones. They weren't welcoming, they were a warning. The stone door of the mausoleum was ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me forward. Inside, the light I saw was gone, replaced by an absolute, suffocating blackness. A smell of damp earth and something else. Something sickly sweet, hit me. I raised my camera, its night vision piercing the void, and that's when I saw them. Figures standing in the corners of the crypt, their forms indistinct, shifting like smoke. They weren't statues, they were watching me. Suddenly, the heavy stone door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into total darkness and a deafening silence. Panic set in. My flashlight was dead. The camera screen went black. I was trapped. The air became frigid, and the sweet smell was now overwhelming. I could hear breathing all around me, slow and raspy, getting closer. Soft, cold fingers brushed against my neck, and a voice whispered directly in my ear. A single, terrifying word. Found my blood ran cold. This wasn't a legend, it was a trap. I scrambled blindly, my hands finding only cold, damp stone walls. The whispers started again, a chorus of ghostly voices echoing in the small space, telling me I was now one of them, that I would never leave Blackwood. I don't know how I'm recording this, or if it will ever be found. But if you're watching this, stay away from this place. Don't come looking for answers. Don't come looking for me. The moon hung high and cold, casting long skeletal shadows across the field. We'd been walking for hours, the old map clutched in my hand, its cryptic markings leading us further into this forgotten corner of the world. And then, we saw them. A clearing, bathed in an unnerving silver light. The air grew still, heavy with a silence that felt older than the trees surrounding us. These graves were different. Freshly turned soil, dark and rich, mounded in neat, repeating rows. But there were no names, no headstones, no wooden crosses, not even a pile of rocks to mark who lay beneath. It was as if the dead were buried in a hurry, their identities erased, their stories swallowed by the earth. The wind picked up, a low moan that snaked through the tall grass, making it writhe and dance in a way that felt completely unnatural. It wasn't just the wind. It was something else, a presence that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run from this place and never look back. But a morbid curiosity held me rooted to the spot. Who were these people? Why were they buried with such secrecy? The silence was a weight, pressing down, a question hanging in the air that no one dared to answer. Each mound of earth was a silent testament to a life abruptly ended and a memory deliberately forgotten. I took a hesitant step forward, my boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, 1,000 unseen eyes boring into me from the darkness of the surrounding woods. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something faintly sweet, like wilting flowers. But there were no flowers here, only the grass, the dirt, and the endless, silent graves. A shiver traced its way down my spine. We weren't just looking at a burial ground. We had stumbled upon a secret, one that was never meant to be found. And as the moon disappeared behind a thick, dark cloud, plunging the field into absolute blackness. I had the terrifying realization that we were not alone. The silence had been broken, and the real story was just beginning. Follow to see what happens next. The rain had finally stopped, but the air hung heavy and thick, smelling of wet earth and something else. Something ancient and forgotten. I'd been wandering for what felt like hours, completely lost among the crumbling headstones. The path had vanished, swallowed by the overgrown grass and the encroaching fog. Every shadow seemed to twist into a grotesque shape, and the silence was so deep it felt like a pressure against my eardrums. I was about to give up, to just sit down and wait for morning, when a faint light flickered in the distance. Hope surged through me. I pushed through tangled thorns and damp leaves, my boots sinking into the mud with each step. The light grew stronger, a warm golden glow cutting through the swirling grey mist. It was a lantern held by a figure standing beside a massive, weeping angel statue. As I got closer, the details of the scene sharpened. It was an old man, his back stooped with age. He wore a heavy dark coat, and the lantern in his hand cast long dancing shadows that made the whole cemetery seem alive. He turned his head slowly, as if he'd sensed my approach long before I saw him. That's when I saw his face, and my heart hammered against my ribs. It was a roadmap of wrinkles, each line telling a story I didn't want to hear. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. They seemed to glow with a faint, otherworldly light, reflecting the lantern's flame. He stared at me, not with surprise, but with a chilling sense of recognition, like he had been waiting for me all along. The air grew impossibly cold. He raised a bony finger and beckoned me closer. I took a hesitant step, then another, drawn in by some unseen force. When I was just a few feet away, he leaned in, the lantern light illuminating the side of his weathered face. His voice was a dry, rasping whisper like dead leaves skittering across pavement. He said, "You're not from around here, are you? This place, it has rules." I just stared, unable to speak. He leaned in even closer, his glowing eyes boring into mine. "Listen to me carefully," he rasped. "If you hear footsteps behind you, never turn around." He then pulled back, melting into the fog as his lantern light faded, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness, with his warning echoing in my mind. The city lights faded behind me, swallowed by the encroaching fog. All I could hear was the gravel crunching under my own feet. The path ahead was a dark ribbon, disappearing into the mist. It felt like walking into nothingness. I pulled my jacket tighter, a sudden chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. It was that feeling you get, you know? The one that tells you you're not alone. I tried to shake it off, blaming the eerie silence and say ghostly tendrils of fog curling around the skeletal trees. My pace quickened. I just wanted to get to the other side, back to civilization, back to the light. That's when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the wind, or a stray animal. It was a footstep, slow, deliberate, and heavy. It came from somewhere behind me in the darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs. I kept walking, telling myself not to be ridiculous. But then it came again. 1, 2, 3, a steady rhythm that seemed to mock my own frantic pace. It was close. Too close. I didn't dare turn back. I was too afraid of what I might see, or worse, what I might not. The sound was so clear, yet the fog was so thick. Who could be out here? I focused on my breathing, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. Inhale, exhale, just keep moving. But the footsteps were relentless, matching my every move. When I sped up, they sped up. When I slowed, they slowed. A terrifying dance in the dark. A cold sweat beaded on my forehead. My imagination ran wild, painting pictures of faceless things, of monsters from childhood nightmares. Then, the footsteps stopped. The sudden silence was even more terrifying than the sound itself. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing, and that's when I felt it. A puff of warm, foul-smelling air on the back of my neck. Whatever it was right behind me now, breathing on my skin. I still didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just stood there, paralyzed, waiting. Alright, let's dive into one of the most chilling local legends. A story that still sends shivers down the spines of everyone who hears it. We're talking about the vanished girl, Amelia. Last year, this bright, vibrant young woman disappeared without a trace, right here, in these very woods. The search was massive, involving hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement, but they found nothing. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed her whole. Her family was devastated, her friends were heartbroken, and the community was left with a gaping wound and a terrifying question. What happened to Amelia? Officially, the case went cold, but unofficially, a new, much spookier story began to take shape. People who walk these trails after dusk, especially near the old oak tree where she was last seen, report hearing things. A faint, desperate whisper carried on the wind. Some say it's just the trees, the wind playing tricks on your mind, but others are convinced it's her. They say Amelia's spirit is trapped here, forever replaying her final moments, forever calling out for the help that never came. Hikers, campers, even paranormal investigators have come here, drawn by the mystery. Many leave with their own unsettling experiences. They talk about sudden cold spots on a warm night, the feeling of being watched from the shadows, and that same faint, heart-wrenching whisper, "Help me." It's a tragic story, one that blurs the line between a real-life mystery and a supernatural tale. Is it a grieving community's way of coping with an unresolved loss, or is there truly a restless spirit wandering these woods? The official investigation might be over, but for those who believe, Amelia's story is far from finished. She's still here, a ghostly silhouette among the trees, a sad reminder of a life cut too short. So if you ever find yourself walking these paths as darkness falls, listen closely. You might just hear her calling for you. Ever wonder what secrets lie buried beneath our feet? I'm not talking about treasure or ancient artifacts. I'm talking about the stories that were never meant to be told, the ones that claw their way out from the darkness. We were exploring a forgotten cemetery, a place so old the names on the tombstones had been worn away by time and rain. It was just another day of urban exploration, or so we thought. We stumbled upon a mausoleum, half swallowed by ivy and neglect. It looked like it hadn't been touched in centuries. The air grew heavy, cold, and a silence fell over our group that was deeper than just the absence of sound. That's when it happened. The massive stone door, thick and imposing, began to move. It slid open with a deep, grating groan that vibrated through the ground, a sound of stone grinding against stone after 100 years of stillness. No one was touching it. It moved on its own. We were frozen, a mix of fear and morbid curiosity holding us in place. We had to see what was inside. We aimed our flashlights into the pitch-black opening, the beams cutting through decades of stale, musty air. The inside was small, bare, just a stone chamber, but the walls, oh God, the walls, they were covered in scratches, deep frantic gouges in the solid stone, crisscrossing in a chaotic frenzy. These weren't the marks of time or weather. They were deliberate. You could almost see the splintered fingernails, the raw, bleeding tips dragging down the stone in a desperate failed attempt to break out. This wasn't a final resting place, it was a prison. The horror of it washed over us. Someone had been buried alive in here. The story wasn't about who died, but about how they spent their final moments, conscious, terrified, and trying to claw their way out from the inside. We backed away slowly. The image of those scratches burned into our minds. Some doors are better left unopened. My heart was pounding, a drum solo in the deafening silence of the abandoned asylum. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to not look back, but curiosity, that fatal human flaw, got the better of me. I had to know what was making that sound, that awful wet, scraping noise that seemed to slither down the hallway behind me. It was a sound that didn't belong in this world, a sound of something broken, something wrong. Taking a shaky breath that did nothing to steady my nerves, I finally turned around, and that's when I saw it. At the far end of the corridor, cloaked in shadows where the moonlight couldn't reach, was a figure that wasn't standing. It was on all fours, crawling. But this wasn't a human crawl. Its limbs were bent at impossible angles, like a spider's, contorting and snapping with each grotesque movement. And the eyes. They weren't eyes. They were two pinpricks of malevolent, glowing light, burning through the darkness, fixed directly on me. For a moment we were frozen in a terrifying tableau, predator and prey. Then, it moved, faster. The scraping sound intensified, a chorus of dragging flesh and snapping bone. It was closing the distance with unnatural speed, its distorted form scuttling across the grimy floor. Faster, faster. My mind went blank. All thought, all reason, evaporated, replaced by a singular, primal command. Run. I spun on my heel, my boots slipping on the slick floor, and I sprinted. I didn't dare look back. I could hear it gaining on me, the sickening crawl turning into a frantic, chaotic scramble. The hallway stretched on forever, a nightmarish tunnel. Doors flashed by on either side, all of them locked, all of them useless. My lungs burned, begging for air, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. The glowing eyes were seared into my memory, a constant presence just over my shoulder. I could feel its cold breath on my neck, smell the decay that clung to it like a shroud. I risked a glance. It was right there, its mangled hand reaching, its fingers like sharpened talons ready to tear into my flesh. I screamed, a raw guttural sound of pure terror, and pushed myself harder, fueled by sheer adrenaline. I have to get out. I have to survive this. But how can you outrun a nightmare when it's chasing you down a dead-end hall? The ground gave way beneath my feet with a sickening crack. One moment I was carefully navigating the overgrown cemetery. The next I was falling through darkness, dust and splintered wood filling the air. I landed hard on a cold stone floor. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the sudden echoing silence. When my eyes adjusted, I realized I wasn't just in a collapsed grave. I had fallen through it, into something else entirely. An underground room. My flashlight beam cut through the oppressive dark, revealing a scene straight from a nightmare. The air was thick with the scent of old wax and something else. Something metallic and ancient. Dozens of candles were scattered around, some still flickering with an eerie, unnatural light, as if they were floating just above the stone. My light danced across the walls, and I saw them symbols, intricate, disturbing symbols carved deep into the stone, glowing faintly with a light of their own. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen, a mix of geometric shapes and what looked disturbingly like twisted human figures. And then I saw the bones. They weren't just scattered debris from the grave above. They were arranged, deliberately. Skulls formed a perfect circle in the center of the room. Rib cages were laid out in star-like patterns. Femurs and other long bones were stacked into small, altar-like structures. It was a macabre, meticulously constructed display. It was clear this wasn't just a forgotten crypt. Someone had been down here recently performing rituals. The candles, the symbols, the arranged bones. This was a place of dark intent. I had to get out. But looking up at the jagged hole I'd fallen through, I realized escape wasn't going to be easy. A cold dread washed over me as I understood I wasn't just trapped. I had stumbled into someone's secret, and I had a terrible feeling they wouldn't want me to leave. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a frantic drum in the dead silence of the cemetery. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, grew impossibly cold. I had followed the old keeper, drawn by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. He moved with a strange shuffling grace among the tombstones, his lantern casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. I thought he was just a lonely old man, a bit eccentric perhaps, but harmless. I was so wrong. I watched from behind a crumbling mausoleum as he stopped before a large, unmarked granite slab. He knelt, his gnarled fingers tracing symbols on the stone that seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly green light. That's when I noticed it. The ground around him wasn't still. It was shifting, churning, as if something were trying to claw its way out from beneath the earth. A low moan echoed, not from the wind, but from the very soil itself. The keeper stood up, his back to me, and his shoulders began to contort. A sickening crackle, like dry leaves being crushed, filled the air. His tweed jacket ripped at the seams, and his skin started to split, revealing not flesh and bone, but something dark, like obsidian, with glowing red symbols etched into it. His form elongated, his limbs stretching unnaturally, and horns, twisted and black, erupted from his skull. The kindly old man was gone. In his place stood a terrifying, demonic figure, radiating an ancient power that made my soul ache. He wasn't a keeper of the grounds, he was a jailer. The cemetery wasn't a place of rest, it was a prison, and he was the guardian, the monstrous warden keeping the dead from escaping their eternal confinement. The moans from the ground intensified, filled with a desperate, horrifying hunger. A whisper, cold as the grave, slithered directly into my ear, though he hadn't moved. He should have never come here. My blood turned to ice. I was trapped between the damned and their demonic sentinel. I finally understood the truth, and I knew I was never going to leave. When I escaped the cemetery, the sun was rising. The first rays of dawn cut through the morning mist, painting the ancient tombstones in a soft, ethereal glow. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, deafening silence. The chilling whispers, the unseen touches, the feeling of being watched by 1,000 dead eyes, it was all behind me now. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. Each step on the dew-kissed grass was a step away from that nightmare, a step back towards the world of the living. I reached the old iron gates, the ones I'd foolishly climbed over just hours before. They stood ajar, a silent invitation to leave. I stumbled through, my body shaking with a mixture of terror and relief. I was out. I was free. The narrow country road stretched before me, winding its way back to civilization. The air felt cleaner here, fresher, untainted by the scent of decay and forgotten sorrows that clung to the cemetery grounds. I kept running, fueled by pure adrenaline, not stopping until the silhouette of the graveyard was just a speck in the distance. Finally, I slowed to a walk, gasping for air, leaning against a weathered wooden fence. The sun was higher now, warm on my skin. I did it. I survived the night. A hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. I looked down at the dusty road, at my own 2 feet, wanting to see the solid proof of my existence, the confirmation that I was real, that I was alive, and that's when I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. The morning sun cast long sharp shadows from the trees, the fence posts, everything, but where my own shadow should have been, there was nothing, just empty, sunlit ground. A cold dread, far worse than anything I'd felt in the cemetery, washed over me. I turned around, my movements stiff and robotic. The fog, which had been dissipating, was now rolling in again, thick and unnatural, swirling just behind me. It wasn't just mist. It had shapes, forms, ghostly figures coalescing within it. And from that chilling fog, a faint, familiar whisper seemed to curl around my very soul, a voice I recognized from the darkest moments of the night. It was Amelia's voice, soft and final. "You didn't leave. You're one of us now." Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.